after completing a few chapters of the game, I felt that I could actually give what I would believe a competent review of what Defiance is. Now this review is going to be primarily for the PlayStation 3, but considering it's the same game across all the different platforms, the only real difference is graphics and maybe possible server lag or non-existent server lag, depending on what you were playing on as far as your platform. It's going to be the same. And it's an interesting attempt from Trion Worlds to try and take a third-person shooter with RPG elements and try and turn it into an interesting MMO. I mean, you have other third-person shooter games that are similar to an MMO, but they're more combat-oriented. It's just more big team battles, as to where this tries to tell more of a story through gameplay. And it's actually been a lot of fun so far. The main backstory, which is seen from the beginning and also can be, more of it can be discovered through going through the story missions, finding data recorders, and looking at the intel as you progress through the game. It begins actually in 2013. What happens is the Votan, which is a collection of various alien races, kind of flees to our planet in an attempt to try and coexist because their planet's long since gone. It's kind of like an immigrant story. And at first things go okay, and it gets to a point where you're almost very close to coexisting with one another peacefully, but then again, you know, when there's people with differences, even in our world here today, it's going to lead to conflict. And an all-out war ends up breaking out, to which the alien tech from the ships kind of breaks off from a lot of the destruction, crashes into the world, and kind of just ravages it and starts terraforming it to something that's completely different, to where Earth is almost completely unrecognizable. It gets to a point where at least the majority of the Votan and the humans kind of realize how stupid they were, and now they realize that their only chance of survival in this new Earth is to, you know, work together to try and survive, which is more or less what leads to the current story of what Defiance is. You play as an Ark hunter who's hired by Von Bach of Von Bach Industries, which you're not really sure what Von Bach Industries is, but it's kind of obvious that it's a major corporation that deals in a lot of technology and scientific opportunities and stuff like that. Especially later on when you hear that he probably also deals with a lot of weapons, as he's known as the Death Merchant or the Death Dealer. And you're on the New Freedom ship. It mysteriously gets attacked and crashes, and you kind of go from there, exploring this new Earth, trying to search out Ark tech and other alien technology to try and help Von Bach save the world. And that's more or less the story from the very beginning, and it goes a lot from there. And you discover more, like I said, through actually playing through the story missions. It's where you get a lot more of the story. It doesn't expect you to know the Defiance show to understand what's going on in the game. They kind of, from what I've seen so far, play off one another. I haven't seen the show. It's still not out yet. I am interested in it. But there's already what's known as episode missions, which is very interesting, which kind of give you backstory to the two main characters of the show. And I'm sure the show is probably going to have its little nods to the game itself, and they're probably going to go back and forth. And as far as the game is concerned, like I said, you start off as the Ark hunter. The create-a-player is pretty standard fanfare. I mean, you have the choice of male, female. You have the human or Rathiant, which is funny because I've noticed a few people actually calling them the Votan. The Votan is actually the collective of aliens, not the actual playable race that you have. And from there, you have different facial options. I mean, it's not crazy. It's like what you'd find in most MMOs. But you can still create something that looks somewhat unique. And then you have your origin story. Your origin story isn't much. It's kind of more of like a headcanon, a story you kind of make up of on your own, or from what it reads as far as your character's backstory, but that's really about it. And the only thing it does for you is it is your starting outfit and also your starting weapon, whether it be an assault rifle, a shotgun, a light machine gun, and I believe the other one was a sniper rifle. That's really about it. From there, I mean, there's a lot of different similarities that people like to draw between this game and Borderlands, and I can see how that's made. But a lot of people fail to realize this is an MMO, and a lot of its elements are actually taken from other MMOs, I mean, which has almost become a standard. Like the different colors as far as the weapons that you, and shields and grenades that you loot. I mean, from going from green, blue, purple, that's all been done even as with more commonly known World of Warcraft and even a little bit before that. So I mean, that's not specific to Borderlands. But I guess because of the fact that it's post-apocalyptic and because of the fact that you're shooting guns and you have the loot system, which Borderlands took from other games as well, I could see where people can come to that conclusion. But it definitely is unique in many of its own ways. Sorry about the kind of change in awful lighting. It started to get dark, so I did improvise. I decided to quickly add this in there because I forgot after doing all that god-awful recording about this detail. As far as the RPG elements and the leveling up and the different abilities that you get, it's broken down into 4 main abilities, which you have Overcharge, which is your huge damage booster when you're firing. You have Blur, which greatly increases your speed as well as melee capabilities. Your Cloak, which can be used either offensively or defensively, as far as making you practically disappear mid-combat or even before combat, giving you a slight edge in that regard. As well as the fact that you have Decoy, which sends out a little decoy which works really well against the actual enemies that you're going to be fighting against. I'm not sure how well it works in PvP. I haven't really seen anybody use it. But other than those main abilities, once you choose one of those, you kind of have a little bit of a tree to work off of as far as your perks. But you only have so many perks at a time until you level up further, but even then you're still limited. You can't have all the perks activated at once, so you really have to pick and choose. And there's also some thought that you need to put into it, because in order to unlock other abilities, you have to plan the path you're going to take as far as where you're going to go. It's not, you know, so cut and dry like it is with other RPGs, to where you have just the trees and you're just going down those trees. This is what you have to choose from. You kind of have to work your way around to get to certain things. And I haven't got as many levels, as far as many abilities, to where I've been able to cross over onto the other side, is you have the 4 different spectrums for the 4 different special abilities. From what I understand, you can choose perks from other special abilities, even though you're using a different special ability from another side. So that definitely makes it very interesting, kind of allows you to create your own character. You're not kind of forced into this class-based system like you are with other MMOs. Besides the fact that you can create your player, and what you can actually do is, unlike Borderlands, you can actually modify your weapons. There is no real crafting system in this game. The way it's actually going to work is by breaking down certain weapons, you can go ahead and get a kind of currency to go ahead and either add random mod slots, which do take real time to go ahead and do to certain weapons, or even just go ahead and attach other mods that will not only change the stats of the weapon you're currently using, but based on what section of mod, whether it be a clip, a muzzle, a sight, or a stock, can actually alter to a certain degree what the weapon actually looks like, which I found interesting. Because usually when you mod weapons in other MMOs, you really don't see any difference, only that change in stat. So that's kind of cool. The gameplay is rather simple. It's really very similar to many other third-person shooters as far as controls, with your standard jump, switch weapons, crouch, aim, shoot. There's really not much as far as that's concerned, which is good because it makes it very easy to jump in the game. There's not a huge learning curve. Grenades, you don't need to worry about, because just like your special abilities, grenades kind of come back after a certain period of time. It's a cooldown phase. But your weapons, they do require ammo. But that's not a big deal, because there's usually ammo boxes littered around, as well as the fact that when you kill certain enemies, they will go ahead and drop ammo, as well as sometimes, not as much as people would think, loot, as well as currency that you would use throughout the game. There are microtransactions in this game, but it's not necessary. It doesn't really give you as much of an edge. It's not the pay-to-win model that a lot of people would think. It basically just gets you certain weapons a little bit quicker than you would, but nothing that would be too crazy. They would really give you a serious advantage over everybody else, which kind of leads to the multiplayer. I mean, it's a very open world, just as you would expect from an MMO. And what I find different than other MMOs, and what I really appreciate, is I tend to, at least at the beginning, kind of solo to get a feel for the game and have fun with it. And generally when you go to certain areas in other MMOs, if there's like a mob boss, or there's a certain, mission that you're trying to complete, if somebody else gets there before you, or if you're in the middle of it, they kind of kill, steal, or get in the way, then you're kind of screwed over and you have to wait for that respawn. That's not how this works in the game. Groups can either be created on your own, so you actually have an actual group together, or it can kind of be organic, to where if you're in the middle of trying to accomplish a mission, somebody can go ahead and run in and assist you. So you don't really have to worry about being griefed in such a way. So that's definitely a good thing. Aside from that, you also have these massive world events known as Arkfalls. The same way how the Earth was terraformed in the first place, the whole point of the Ark Hunters is they're looking for tech. So these Arkfalls are huge opportunities to try and find that kind of tech as far as story is concerned. But as a player, as far as the game is concerned, you generally want to go to these Arkfalls because there's a chance to get some very good level-oriented loot. I keep saying basically. Loot that will appear will be at your level. So whoever is basically playing, it works out for everybody. You're not going to get something that's going to be too high or something that's going to be useless for you. So you have the opportunity of getting good loot, getting good experience, and just actually having a lot of fun with a lot of your other fellow players as you're taking on, at least in the minor Arkfalls, you're going to fight some tougher enemies. And then when it leads to the final bit, which is the major Arkfalls, you're going to fight off some giant, massive bosses in some of those situations. And those can take up some time. I guess they would be similar to raids to people who are familiar with other MMOs. Probably a little bit shorter than that. I guess it would be more familiar than just the raid boss. I guess that would be a better way of explaining it. But it definitely feels rewarding. You have a lot of fun watching a lot of people get thrown around, including yourself. You're fighting off against some pretty massive creatures and some kind of difficult creatures. Even if you have some pretty good gear, it's definitely going to challenge you at least to some degree. Then you have your standard PvP, which is very easy to jump into. I mean, the user interface has a quick match, go straight into matchmaking, and you can jump right into a team deathmatch or even a capture point, and then they have the Shadow War. Now, the team deathmatch and capture point is pretty self-explanatory. What's interesting is Shadow War. Shadow War kind of takes place on this open world. So you're not stuck actually leaving to go to any of these match-made maps that are specifically made for PvP. It kind of happens in real time where you're facing off against other Ark Hunters. So that definitely feels a lot more fluid because, again, you're not going anywhere. It's all happening around that area, fighting off against other players. And you can kind of jump in at almost any time. You can decide to become part of that Shadow War that's going on. As far as team deathmatch and the capture point, it's a lot of fun. I actually really enjoyed it. I'm not really a big fan of PvP in general, but it was quite enjoyable for myself and some of the other people that I know who've played. Some of my friends, they've also felt the same way about it. It kind of feels slightly unbalanced, to me at least. I don't think that's the case. It's really, I guess, just the difference of how many different weapons you have to choose from, because there is no restrictions as to what weapons you can use. Some weapons are restricted by a level, but that you just level up and you're able to use them. But other than that, you can use whatever weapons at your disposal. And because there's just so many different perks, as well as the 4 different main abilities you have to choose from, you can kind of build your character your own way. So I haven't really seen anybody sticking to a certain build. So it makes for very interesting combat. So I guess that's why, to me, it would feel slightly unbalanced, because you see people running around with a shotgun and it's all over with. But then again, shotgun at close range has always been deadly in just about any game. And another thing in regards to multiplayer, you also have the co-op maps. And the way the co-op maps work is you're in a small group of people in a self-contained instance to where there's some story involved as well, and you kind of work together as a team to try and complete it. Which, as far as the boss battles, at least the final boss battle of that co-op map, can be a little bit interesting as far as combat's concerned. You really have to work together as a team, otherwise you're likely going to fail. As I mentioned before, you have the story missions, which are fully voiced, and it's a full-on cutscene, which again is a nice departure from the standard MMO. There's a lot of jokes about how ugly a lot of the people are. I guess so be it. People want, beautiful people to look at all the time. That's their prerogative. To me, I don't mind as long as the story is good, which so far it has been. It's very interesting, slowly becoming attached to certain characters. I believe her name's Cass, the Erathian female that kind of you see from the beginning. She's very funny. And a lot of these swear words I'm slowly trying to pick up on, like Stako and Scruggin, which would be, I guess, the equivalent of saying shit and fuck. But they kind of have their own way of swearing, almost similar to Battlestar Galactica, or like in Firefly, when they're cursing in, I believe it's Chinese. So that's kind of funny how they try and do that. It's a kind of a nod to other TV shows and sci-fi subjects that have done that as well. And even as I mentioned before as well, you have episode missions. And the cool thing about the episode missions is it introduces you to the two main characters of the Defiance TV series. You learn a lot about their backstories before the show even is out yet. So you kind of get an understanding of who they are as people. Not only that, but at least from what I see, because you already have quite a few episodes you can play through as far as the actual episode missions, it's either going to be, I'm assuming at this point, but it's going to either be weekly when the actual episodes come out, or possibly even monthly, they're going to come out with new episode missions, which again kind of tie in, they go back and forth between the two. So I mean, for me, overall, the great thing about Defiance is, even though it is an MMO, it can go either way, depending on the person's playstyle. You can either play it solo, like I have for the most part so far, with some groups, and it can be a lot of fun on your own. So it kind of feels more just like a third-person shooter game that you picked up that just so happens to have multiplayer. Or it can be played with, guilds, groups set up to where it feels like a full-fledged MMO, which in itself kind of stands on its own as well. It's not going to be Game of the Year, and it's going to be tough competing with a lot of the other MMOs that are out there, but it definitely has many hours of enjoyment to offer with many of its different gameplay modes. It's very interesting so far, and I really am looking forward to see how it's going to tie into the Defiance show, because I'm also interested in seeing where that's going to go. So, as I mentioned before, it's been a lot of fun. I like the fact that you're able to mod. The PvP is actually fun. The missions, at least stories are concerned, are not repetitive. Like I said, I'm starting to get into the story. The characters are likable, at least some of them are, and some other characters you're going to enjoy hating. That's generally the way how the story's at least somewhat decent. As far as the cons are concerned, because no game's perfect, there still are issues with server lag. I've heard that some people playing on the PC still haven't even been able to get into the game to play it. There's been issues to where I've collided with objects that I haven't even seen there because it's taken a while for it to actually pop up, which could be partially due to the internet I have. I have AT&T, but I have their highest that they have to offer, which still isn't that fast. We were talking about 15 megabytes per second. That's not, the pinnacle of high-speed internet. But it's still enough to where I would feel that it's more of an issue with the actual servers than it is with my internet, that you would run into something like that. But it's not game-breaking, and it's not a huge pain, as many people would think. Other than that, the side missions seem somewhat... They're more like fetch quests. Go do this, or pick me up this object, or go to this location and do that. I mean, it's something you're going to have in just about any MMO. Those generally aren't going to be that interesting, but it's what they're doing to kind of help you get levels and experience besides the main stories. So it's just kind of something to break off and help you along as far as that regards, but it almost feels unnecessary. Overall, what I would give, at least as far as what I've had to play as far as Defiance so far, like I said, I've gone through some of the chapters, given a lot more time than most people seem to have given it. I would definitely say if you're a fan of anything as far as sci-fi is concerned, because it definitely has kind of a Firefly feel to it, although Firefly's on a league of its own. It is a lot of different nods to other sci-fi shows and other things in the sci-fi genre. It's a pleasant third-person shooter RPG. It's a lot of fun in that regards. There's definitely a lot to be done in the game, and it definitely offers a lot of enjoyment for only $60, considering there's also going to be more content coming out. And this game probably can be played for quite a long time. There's definitely a whole lot to do. So, I mean, it definitely helps it in that regards because there's no subscription fee, which is also different than a lot of the other MMOs that are out there as well. I'd say buy it. It's definitely going to be worth the money. If you're unsure about it, even after seeing this review, I would say at least go ahead and play it on a friend's computer or platform, whether it be Xbox 360 or PS3, just so you can go ahead and tell in the end. But in the end, like I said, I personally would say buy it. It's going to be worth it. I've had a lot of fun with it, as well as some of my friends.